The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Game Toppers, childhood illness running rampant through households, and listeners like you.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the Gateway City, St. Louis, Missouri, it's The Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board card and probably not role-playing games. Today, the Dukes review The Siege of Runedar from Reiner Knizia and Ludonova. Then the Dukes take a look back at their review of Red Rising in their Dukes Double Take. And now, The Dukes of Dice.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean.
And also Alex.
And you're joining us for episode 273, which we are simply calling Gold. Gold. Gold.
Gold.
That's it. Not 3 times, just 1 time, but I did say it 3 times. But no, it's just Gold, and that title is thanks to BJ from Board Game Gumbo. Did you know From Board Game Gumbo is BJ's actual last name, legally speaking?
Yeah, he changed it.
As a lawyer, it's pretty easy.
Right. Yeah. He's from the law firm of Board Game Gumbo, and Board Game Gumbo.
No. His last name is From...
Oh, sorry. From Board Game Gumbo, and from Board Game Gumbo, attorneys at law.
Yes. Alex, why is this episode so aptly named Gold?
Gold. So and not the only name, and we'll talk about the rest, because we get help naming all of our episodes from our Board Game Geek Guild number 2008.
No. Yeah, that was going to happen, but why is this one so aptly named Gold?
Well, it's perfect because you have the gold at the core of the Siege of Runedar, which represents victory points and is sort of what you're trying to protect and get away with in that game. And then in Red Rising, the sort of top family in that class system are the golds. So it fits both of them quite aptly, and an elegant one-word title. And so, BJ, congratulations. You've named it. You did it.
And Alex, you are correct. That you got this right. I mean, I don't know how you knew it, but you got it right. Yes, we do get help naming all of our episodes from our Board Game Geek Guild, Guild number 2008. And at the end of the episode, again, correct again, Alex, way to go. We're going to tell you about all the runners-up for naming this week's title.
I don't know how I pulled it off, Sean, but
yeah.
I appreciate your patience as I tried to figure out this show.
You're like, so here's what it's like. And this is, so maybe this is why I'm a little upset with you right now. I'm very upset, so super upset. So anytime I'm questioning somebody in a deposition or in a hearing or on trial or whatever, I ask a very specific question and they ask me something completely, or they answer something completely different. So that's it. You just bring a little work PTSD this fine Saturday morning.
Sorry about that. How have you been, Sean? I sort of hinted in the pre-roll. So you mentioned you're dealing with some a sick kiddo. I have a good sick kiddo story, and by good I mean
great.
But yeah, you go first.
No, our allergies have been just off the charts the last couple weeks. And Chewy's had a cough. She has some asthma, so we have to keep that managed. Yesterday there was this like monstrous dust storm here in Albuquerque and super high winds. I came out of a deposition at another attorney's office yesterday at around 3:30 p.m. and it was the sky was just brown everywhere. And in the few minutes walk from the office to my car, my mouth was just full of dirt from the wind. It was disgusting. And yeah, so last night, everyone's allergies just peaked. I don't know if you can maybe hear a little bit of nasally in my voice. And but yeah, Chewy being by the way, her birthday was 2 days ago when we were out celebrating last night too, with my mom. And yeah, so she's a gross 8-year-old and doesn't blow her nose, doesn't get rid of all the gunk, just snorts it all up. And so this morning she woke up like hacking and throwing up a little bit. And so yeah, it's fun. Good times, but she's good. She's fine. Everything's great. How are you? Star Wars.
Well, yeah, no, I knew the reference. That is one movie I've seen. So Sean, Ruby has been hitting a lot of firsts. Her grandparents, Nana and Paps, Abby's mom and dad, are in town. And she's been doing great. She's been rolling onto her belly and kind of starting to kind of pivot in a circle effectively when she's on her belly. She's not crawling or can't really propel herself forward or backward in any real intentional way, but she can start to spin. And so we're starting to not have her in the big puffy suit for sleeping. She's starting to have the arms free a little bit. And she's got a little tooth on the bottom, so that's coming in. Yeah, I know. Stuff's happening. All sorts of fun things are happening.
So she's working on her Curly from the Three Stooges impression. Do we know when she's going to work on her Moe impression?
I don't know the Three Stooges well enough to engage with this joke.
It's the pivoting in circles. Like, you know how he's on at the ground, Curly's on the ground, he goes, woo, 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 woo. No?
Not a Three Stooges guy.
I wouldn't call myself a Three Stooges guy, but I have passive familiarity with it.
Well, I mean, I know them by name, and in any case. Not this past Tuesday, but the Tuesday before, Sean. Towards the end of lunch, I get a call from Ruby's daycare. She's got a fever. She's got to go home. I go pick her up. I bring her home. And at that time, it was about 101-ish. And then over the course of the next few days, her fever peaked at 104.9.
Ooh.
Yeah, not good. So this was our first time dealing with really sick Ruby, and she was just miserable. Her eyes would get crusted over, and just snotty and clearly hot, and just Ruby is the chillest, easiest baby most of the time. She was just in this mode of, I just want to be held, I just want to fall asleep on you, I just want to feel better, and it's scary as a parent because you don't know what to do. There's a limit on numbers of medication she can take at that age. We took her into the pediatrician. They said, yeah, it's not COVID, it's not flu. It's a set of other infections that she'll probably battle off, and in the meantime, give her acetaminophen, and she should be okay eventually, but could be a rough ride, and if it keeps going on, I don't know, call us back. So we kept her hydrated, but, I mean, there were just a lot of scary late-night moments where she's just so hot, and so that completely derailed all of last week. I mean, just Abby was home. I was sort of half working, half not, and it was our first time going through that. And I know it won't be the last, but man, did that hit something different for sure.
Yeah, it's weird. It's scary. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So. That chewed up an awful lot of the past week, and is going to lead to me getting dunked on during our review segment. This is not a situation where I didn't play the review game, Sean, but I'm going to warn you in advance. You are going to dunk on me for a very specific reason.
Okay, good. I look forward to it.
No, I know.
What do I live for, Alex?
Well, but here's the thing. We're about to talk about me getting dunked on earlier last weekend on this past Saturday when we did Mall Madness Part 2. Sean, to give a little bit of background to the folks, this is a game run by a friend of the show, Chris Michaud, former host of Flip the Table, an awesome podcast about cheesy, weird, and obscure games. We've had him on just about a year ago when he was running Price is Right games. He's no longer running those. He came up with an original IP called Mall Madness. We did a Dukes of Dice hosted show, which was a ton of fun. And then I had a separate private game for my birthday, which had some folks from the first game, some new folks, but all folks that were familiar with Chris pretty much. And Sean, it was a blast. Without giving spoilers, these are various games, word games, audio games, games where you're given a movie and you have to guess what the IMDb score is of it, games where you have to try and guess calories in fast food, Chris does such a great job. It was a great crowd for it. And to keep the rivalry going, it was Sean versus Alex. And it was a pitched battle back and forth where, once again, entering the final game, our team had a lead. But, Sean, you had mentioned you wanted to bet on my failure, bet on me screwing it up.
It's always a safe bet.
And I don't think this is would be considered a spoiler for the game, I guess. Talking about the final game?
Well, I think you can talk about it in some generalities.
Basically, it's you're trying to open stuff and not hit bombs. Because if you hit bombs, stuff that you've already opened goes to the other team. It's a push your luck game.
Think of Minesweeper, but with no deduction.
No deduction, just luck, just chance. And if neither team hits a certain score, you go to a tiebreaker round. And boy, oh boy, was this tense, because it was just back and forth, people right on the precipice of victory and not quite able to get there. And I had a team that I was having pick the numbers that you would choose for this game. And that went well sometimes, it went poorly sometimes. But with a chance to win the game and just needing to open up 2 things safely, I said, I'm going to go down with the ship here. I'm picking the 2 numbers. And the first one was fine, and the second one was very not. Sean, it reminded me a lot of Blood Bowl, that one moment in Blood Bowl, kind of the flip side of that, where you were on the precipice of victory and you mucked it up at the end on an absurdly unlikely result. This was not as unlikely as that result was, but was equally soul-crushing, I think.
And I called it. I called like the exact.
You absolutely called it. Oh, yeah, without a doubt. So, if you're looking for a fun game to do, don't mind doing it remote. I know Zoom isn't always the most appealing thing for folks, especially now that we're sort of moving out of the pandemic, sort of. This is still one that I would highly, highly recommend. Two unique episodes, ton of energy, ton of fun. Check Chris out. Sean, your thoughts on your victory and your team's clutch win.
Yeah, no, we did great. It's a fun time. It's a really fun experience. And I think so. Suzanne was saying, like, it as a compliment, obviously a compliment to Chris. Like, how is it that you can care so much about something that has actual zero stakes, zero, real life consequences? You just get so involved, so tense. It's a great experience. It really is. But no, we did great. And like I said, my strategy was let's just set it up. Let's not be the ones making the choices. Let's let Alex screw this up. It's kind of like Passenger 57. Have you seen that? Stupid reference. No, have you seen it?
No, absolutely not.
Well, Wesley Snipes says, always bet on black. So my thing is always bet on Alex's failure. Number 1.
Yeah, dunk number 1. Dunk number 2, I think, isn't. I think you'll like it. Anyway.
Okay,
we'll
I'm so curious. If it's not a margarita drinking level incident, then I'm okay. All right, we'll see.
You're not going to be annoyed about it, I don't think.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's Mall Madness Part 2. Sean, have you been playing physical board games this week?
I have. So one of them that I played is called Shinkansen : Zero Kai K. I don't know. Let me spell these things if people want to look into these. And spoiler alert for my mini review here. People should look into this one. So Shinkansen is spelled SHINKANSEN, and then I guess there is no colon.
There's a colon. Absolutely.
Oh, there is a colon. Okay.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
I looked this up.
0, you spell it like zero. And then K or Kai, KEI. All right. So
Sean,
yes.
From my middle school Japanese lessons that I took for 2 years, I'm not an authority, but Shinkansen, referencing kind of the bullet train, and
yes.
K, I would say K is probably the closer one. Based on my, again, don't actually know this, not an expert, but I think that's closer. So anyway, Carry on.
All right. Yes, it does involve a bullet train, specifically the bullet train on the, the Tokaido line. So this began being built in 1959 with the aim of inaugurating the fastest train of the time, just before the 1964 Tokyo Olympics. So this is essentially a worker placement game. Nope. Action selection. There we go. And what you're doing over, I believe it's 5 rounds, is you are building out your bullet train. Your train is made up of a front a front end card, a front train card, and a back train card. And then each round, you're going to be adding new, I guess, passenger cars in between, sort of expanding it out. And each one of these cards is it gives you a new action that you are available that's available for you to select as one of your future actions. But it also is keyed into one of the particular stops on this Tokaido line. And at the end of the game, you want to make sure that your oh boy, this okay, let me say this first. Let me take a quick aside. This is a relatively short game, about 45 minutes. In many respects, it's a relatively simple game, but it is fairly opaque in terms of what you're trying to do. And for that reason, I don't know that you would like this game that much, Alex, but I like these kind of shorter, more opaque, rough edges. I don't mind rough edges on a game, and this definitely had all that, and I enjoyed this quite a bit. This was good. So anyway, so a lot of your score comes from having your passenger trains that are keyed to certain stations, making sure that by the end of the game, those stations have been cleared, a line has been built there, and then a station marker has been placed there. And you're going to score more points for more of that's happened. And that kind of happens in that order, right? You kind of clear the area, build the rail in that spot, and then build the station. Actually, I don't think it has to happen in that order. Maybe it does. I think it does. So you also care about making sure that you have, of your passenger cars, that they are hopefully in ascending order from lowest to highest, or from west to east. And so that there's sort of a card drafting that occurs. And so you need to make sure you do that in the right order. There are some actions you can take that let you rearrange portions of your train. And then you also care about, there are 3 different colors of station markers, and you care about having the corresponding train cars for those different colors of station markers. And station markers are worth variable points depending on a track of where those have wound up. So like if the gold marker is the farthest right, that's gonna be worth the most points for each one of those that you have. It's pretty wild. Like at first we were like, what in the world is going on? But it makes sense as the game goes on. So at the top of the board, there are these 5 variable cards that are basically the round cards. They're going to tell you how many actions you have available. They're going to give you a global action that everyone has available to them as one of the actions for that round. And by the way, the start of the game, you start with, I think, 2 actions. By the end of the game, you might have 5 actions. But it's variable. So it's going to be different every game because of their cards that get shuffled up. And then it's also going to tell you the price of building stations in yen. I think it's yen. Then once you figure all that out for the particular round, then there are I think it's the number of players plus 1 cards available. These passenger cards available that everyone's going to draft basically. So you pick which one you want, you put your little marker on it, and then it's going to reset turn order based on who picked the card farthest right, and that resets it immediately for that turn. Also, there's some bonuses and things like that. So then you add that to your card. Now there's a cost associated with it, and that's also in yen you have to pay. And then you also may wind up moving one of those station marker value things like I had talked about. Then in turn order, you take your turns. You have a certain number of actions, and you take your actions to either, like I said, remove, clear the area in a particular station area, build the track. There's also these Olympic torch markers that you have, and there are these 3 areas where you get some sort of immediate bonus, but it's also an endgame scoring for majority control of these torch areas, and also it's start of round income for how many torches you have in these various torch areas. So, Alex, are you confused? Am I confusing you?
So you've lost me to the point where I went back to the project I was doing before you jumped on, which my buddy Josh Lobkowitz, has posted a Eurodance song that he knows the lyrics to, kind of, but can't figure out what the song is, and is trying to get some help with some detective work to figure out what this Eurodance song is. So, no, you lost me about midway through, and then I kind of, my mind drifted. So, Anyway.
So think of me trying to explain the rules for Motainai right now on the podcast.
Oh boy, yeah, not oof.
But it's worth it, right? It's worth it to kind of figure it out and get through it. And that's the same here with what's the name of the game, Alex?
Shinkansen 0K.
Shinkansen. Okay. So yes, it's very, like I said, it's very opaque. A lot of moving pieces, a lot of confusion about how endgame scoring works, at least early on, though everything makes sense later. There's a lot of variable costs. Again, it's depending on what round it is. It's depending on the particular station spot, but it was well worth it. We really enjoyed it. We played it 3-player. In fact, Rory had left, or he was planning on leaving after a game before, and he wound up just sitting down for a few minutes to just watch the start of the game, and he wound up staying for the entire game just to watch it. And he was like, man, I should have played that, because it was quick. It was quick, and it was really interesting. So yeah, that's Shinkansen 0 Kai.
K.
If
it had an A, it would be Kai.
But it doesn't.
No. Mm-mm.
Oh, and by the way, this is published by Ludonova. On BGG, the credits are Isra C, just the initial C, and Shai, Sheis. S is the last initial.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Oh, alternate names. Sheila Santos. That's weird. Clicking on their BGG entries here. And Israel Sendrero. Okay. I don't know why they have, like, I guess maybe it's like a little designer, little fancy schmancy name, maybe.
Yeah, it's a thing. If you were designing, Sean, would you have Sean Ramirez, or would you come up with like a pseudonym?
No, Sean Ramirez.
I think you should. If you ever have a published design, it should be designed by Papa Sean.
Sure, you got it, Alex.
Papa Sean.
I'll do that.
All right, there we go. So Sean, I don't have a specific play to talk about, but I did notice an interesting trend in myself, and it's sort of a perspective trend. When we first started the podcast, if you looked at how many new things I would play versus how many things I would buy, the ratio was significantly towards I would play a bunch of stuff and then hope it was in other people's collection. And okay. I might buy a handful of games, but I didn't have a larger collection. Partly because there was a reliance on other people have this, there's a board game cafe I'll go to, take whatever else. I have noticed, Sean, that I have just been buying stuff. Buying stuff. Parks, 2 exit games. There's a new Land, Air, and Sea standalone game that I bought immediately. There is the new Azul I bought immediately. And in comparison to the number of plays of games and new plays of games I have, almost none. So it's been this weird realization of, oh man, the script has flipped. I'm in a completely new phase where I'm just buying stuff and not playing it. And I'm sure there are some folks listening kind of nodding their heads like, oh, yep, that's me, or it was me, or whatever else. And I think the cycle will come around, but when you combine Ruby's illness with just kind of whatever else, the whatever else was on Wednesday, that would typically be when I would have gone to Jamie Stegmeier's game night. Mm-hmm. And instead, we had tickets to see My Brother and Me when they were live in St. Louis. And so went and watched that podcast. But then that cut down on that opportunity. So it's been an interesting one to navigate, but I was just, again, noticing that ratio of buy versus play. I'm very strongly on the buy side right now rather than the play side.
And I would say, yeah, my buying has dropped off precipitously. But it's made up for with Magic and Warhammer. So,
yeah, you're buying something. It's just
I'm buying something.
Just not new board games necessarily.
No. I mean, yeah. All right. Well,
that's in lieu of a new play, Sean, because I don't have any other ones. My plays this week consisted of our review game, Malt Madness, and I bought a bunch of stuff.
And who designed that buying games experience? Who was the designer?
Capitalism.
And the publisher?
Capitalism?
Oh boy. All right. Well,
all right.
I teed you up for some kind of, something clever, but that's fine.
Some kind of clever. Yeah. No. Good luck with that.
No.
Not
all
happening.
Right. So I'll talk about a play. Oh, look at this.
Whoa.
Savannah Park. This is from Michael Kiesling and Wolfgang Kramer. So pretty good design pedigree there. And I thought this was, I'm looking here on BGG. Yeah, Capstone is one of the publishers here. There's a bunch. But Capstone is one of the publishers. And basically in Savannah Park, you have this, you each have a kind of this hexagon board that's divided into smaller hexagons. And printed on the board are some watering holes, I believe. Let's see, I'm pulling up the picture. It's been a couple weeks since I played this. No, not watering holes. There are trees. There's hexes that have single trees. There are hexes that have a single tree burning, hexes that have 2 trees burning, hexes that have 3 trees burning. And what you're going to do is you and your opponents are going to take these 33 unique animal tiles that you each have. And these animal tiles have some combination of, let's see, there's rhinoceros, there is elephants, giraffes, jackalope. Jackalope's not a thing. What am I thinking of? Jackalope is not a thing that actually exists.
No. Well, it exists in the form of, there was a primarily pottery and art store. I don't know if it still exists, but
it does.
Is it still there?
It does.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it still exists.
Yeah, in New Mexico, called Jackalope, which I loved as a kid because they had like outdoor play space, and it was a good one to kind of hang around at. So yeah, Jackalope.
And your asides are lengthy today.
Sorry. I don't have any substance, so I got to go with style.
Okay, all right. Anyway, it's a horned beast of some kind. I forget what it's called. I was never good with. I never got zoo books as a kid. I begged my parents for zoo books, and this is the result. I can't identify animals 40 years later. There's zebras. Anyway, there's a bunch of different animals, and the tiles are all unique. So there's 33 unique tiles. So you might have one that's just a single elephant. You might have one that's 2 elephants. Then you might have one that's an elephant and a giraffe. And then one that's an elephant, giraffe, and this unnamed mystery beast. And then some of them also have watering holes, and watering holes are important parts of scoring. And so you and your opponents at the start of the game are shuffling up these tiles. Again, you each have your own set of 33. You're then placing them out. Are you placing them out randomly? No, you're not placing them out randomly. I believe one of you is placing them out randomly, and everyone else is matching, so that you all have the same board. Is that possibly right? Am I remembering this correctly? No, I think maybe it is random. This is great. This is great radio. I love it.
Good work.
So it's either uniquely random or it's the same random for all of you. I don't think it really matters. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take turns, and on your turn, you're going to select one of your animal tiles that have not previously been moved. And you basically, you can flip it upside down to note that tile is done. It's been locked. Okay. So you will say, okay, I'm picking the single elephant tile, and I now need everyone else to find their single elephant tile, and they need to move it to one of the empty spaces in their park. And you're just going to keep doing that. You're going to keep doing that till everyone has moved all of the animal pieces. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to set up patterns, not so much patterns, but contiguous areas where you have a bunch of zebras that are together. You have a bunch of elephants that are together, because the larger those contiguous areas are, the more points you're going to score. You're going to get bonuses if watering holes are included in there. You're also need to worry about, remember I talked about those burning trees, the single, the double, the triple, because basically at the end of the game before scoring, if you have a single animal tile next to the single burning tree, that tile's gone before scoring happens. If you have a double animal next to the double burning, that guy's gone too. But the other ones aren't affected. So if I have a single next to a double burning tree, it's fine for some reason. I don't know. It's an abstract more than anything. So yeah, you do that, and then you score things up. Whoever has the most points wins. Yeah, this is good. It was fine. Wasn't crazy about it. It's a lighter, semi-abstract game. I don't know that the theme added a whole lot. I think it could have, I don't want to say pasted on theme, but it was fine. Raquel and I wound up playing it. I think we came in. Oh no, that was one of the Wednesday nights, one of the Duke's Wednesdays that she came in, which is very random and sporadic almost. But she liked it well enough. Neither of us were crazy about it, but I do think it's worth checking out. I mean, Wolfgang Kramer and Kiesling, Michael Kiesling, great designers. I think it's a solid design, and I think if you are into kind of the more shorter, streamlined, puzzly, semi-abstract games, then you might like this. Not necessarily mine and Raquel's preference, but I think it's worth checking. I'm not going to go out and buy it by any means, but it's worth checking out.
It's interesting to think about kind of these two designers, similar theme, and we talked about Renature, also put out by Capstone. They don't sound like similar games other than they're, semi-abstract, have an animal theme, similar design. I mean, the same design team. So, but it doesn't sound like they're that similar.
No, they're not that similar. If I had to choose which one I'd rather play Savannah Park.
Okay. Fair enough.
All right. We did it.
We did it. It's done. It is done. The recent plays, they have been discussed, mostly by Sean. After the break, a review. Well, Sean, the Game Toppers 3.0 Kickstarter is in the books, and thanks to a whole bunch of backers, Game Toppers had a heck of a Kickstarter campaign, more than $800,000 raised to get more Game Toppers, new features, all sorts of fun stuff headed folks' way.
Wait, did you say 800,000?
I did say that amount. Yes.
Oh my goodness. That's a ton of money.
Sean, did you make it in time? Are you part of that group?
It's over? It's over? Like over?
No, it's done. I'm sorry you missed your window. But the good news, Sean, is that if you keep an eye on the Game Toppers LLC website, the late pledge manager should be open in the near future. Take a look there, and you can still get in on all the fun, get the newest features, get yourself a Watson, or get yourself, I don't know, whatever you want. Awesome game mats, rails, something cool to really take your gaming experience to the next level without getting a fully dedicated gaming table, which is exactly what Game Toppers is all about. Check them out, GameToppersLLC.com, because if it ain't a showstopper, it ain't a Game Topper. You are dwarves making a bold last stand, trying to hold off the enemies at the gates. Goblins, orcs, trolls, siege towers, catapults. The world is against you. Everything's crumbling. But you're trying to get that last tunnel out of town and run off with your gold before the castle is completely overrun. Can you build up a good enough deck to do so? We'll talk about it. It's the Siege of Runedar.
Alex, it sure is the Siege of Runedar, and it's also the siege of the basement of the Duchy Dungeon. Can you hear that? Can you hear that water?
I heard something.
Yeah. So it sounds like Raquel's drawing a bath for Chewy, which normally they're like, hey, during the podcast, keep all that stuff to a minimum. But Chewy's sick, so if you hear some noise in the rest of the episode, or at least in the next few minutes, know that's what it is, and apologies in advance. But hey, sick kiddo, so not gonna fight that. All right, so Siege of Runedar, designed by Reiner Knizia. What? Art by Andrew Bosley, publisher Ludonova. This is not what I would expect for a Reiner Knizia game. This is sort of a cooperative deck builder with a very high toy element associated with it. Not Reiner Knizia. Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing. All right, so let's talk about this. You and your buddies are a party of dwarves that are at Runedar, this fort, and you have collected all of this gold that you must protect against orcs, goblins, and trolls. Now, the box turns into the fort. Like the underside of the box turns into the fort. It's this 3D fort. There's sort of the inner part of the fort that's divided into 4 sections. There are walls on the fort. There's a front, left, and right wall. There's also a back wall that's reserved for these big blocks, which is what you're trying to do. You're trying to actually remove these blocks and escape this Runedar fort that's being sieged. And then each one of those sections, because there's, like I said, there's 4 sections. In the back section, you have the rubble that you're trying to clear, and every time you remove rubble, you're going to remove one of the blocks. How many blocks are there, Alex? 5?
5 blocks.
5 blocks. And then in the other sections, you'll have a collection of wood, a collection of wool, and a collection of ore. Now, in addition, you have parapets. You have 3 parapets, 2 on the front, and then 1 on one of the sides, not both of the sides, and that's because of the way the big bricks are kind of laid out. Okay, so there's that. Then you have your dwarves, which are little standees. Oh, there's an intersection, the intersection of the fort too, which is where the gold is protected, and it's also where you need to be if you want to reset the available cards, equipment upgrade cards that you can get throughout the game. Okay, now everyone has a deck of, I believe it's 12 cards. And
yes, always 12, baseball highlight style.
Always 12, right. And on these cards, 2 of them are orc cards. These are sort of dead cards for you, but they also are the kind of the AI of the game, or part of the AI of the game, for having the orcs advance upon you, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail. Now, the rest of your cards are going to have some combination of movement and some combination of action. And generally speaking, you are choosing to use a card either for its movement or for its action. There are some upgrade cards, upgrade equipment cards later in the game that may serve as both, but generally it's one or the other. And some of the actions you have available to you are collect a resource. Now, to collect a resource, you have to have your dwarf in the area where that resource is located, and that's where that movement comes in. Basically, if you have 2 points of movement, I can move 2 adjacent spaces. So if I'm in the center, and if I want to move 2, I can move 1 space to one of the resource areas and another space to the wall space. If I want to get up to one of the parapets, then I may have to spend another card for movement to just get up to a parapet from there. And I can combine those cards. I can combine them as I see fit. I'm basically going to be playing out all the cards from my hand. Some of the other actions are melee combat. Again, I'll explain that in a little bit. There's also range combat with your crossbow. There's also the dig action, which is what lets you clear rubble if you're in the rubble area. So those are the cards you have available to you. There's the whole kind of different permutations of all of those. Everyone's got the same deck. And every round you're going to draw 5 cards, but this is kind of interesting. I don't know that I've seen this before, but in this game, every time you cycle through your deck, before you draw your 5 cards, you have to bury 2 cards temporarily. You put them under this little placeholder of yours. So it's possible that you could be incredibly unlucky and never see 2 specific cards, which is interesting. And I'm kind of interested to talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so those are the decks. Then you also have the buy row, or the build row, I guess to say, of new equipment cards. And there are 3 different decks of equipment cards. There's some easier to build equipment, harder to build, or medium-ish build, and harder to build equipment. And there's going to be, I believe, 6 available. And at the start of the game, I'm trying to remember, are they all easy at the start of the game? I think they're all easy.
They are all easy. You have, and intuitively you might think, well, you replace the easy ones with other easy ones, but no, you have some flexibility in how you do that.
Yeah,
as the game goes.
You'll have choice to how you do that. Yeah. You also have a bunch of orc standees. There's a catapult. There's a siege tower, which I'll talk about those here in a second. And then there's also these mercenaries that are these one-time use cards or one-time use bonuses, but they cost you gold. So let's talk about how you win. I mentioned that briefly. You win if you're able to clear all of the bricks to escape. And so again, that's clearing all of the rubble, which then has 2 goblins pop out. And these goblins might need to get fought, or they might need to you have to spend other cards to get rid of them. Once that's done, you remove a brick. Then you put the rubble back in because you're then working on that. If you're able to do that before you lose, hey, great, you win. Now let's talk about how you lose. You lose in so many different ways because it's a co-op game. You lose if all of your gold it's protected there is stolen. And basically, gold is stolen whenever an orc manages to come into the keep and come in and then move into the center part without being killed first. He's able to run away with the gold. Once he gets there, you don't have an option to like try and chase him out. That's just done. You lose the gold. So that's one way you lose. You also lose if you cannot place any new orc standees out. In other words, you're swarmed with orcs and you haven't killed enough to put them back in the pool, and you're going to lose. You also lose if the catapult has managed to wipe out the equipment deck or the equipment row. So let's talk real quick about what's the other way to lose?
Okay. So
going through the AI deck, the orc AI deck.
So orc AI deck, all gold lost, all 5 catapults out, or all 5 trolls have emerged. That's another one.
Oh, yes. Okay. Whew. All right. So.
Or too many orcs on the board.
Yeah. Mention that.
Sorry.
Right.
Yes.
So on your turn, what you're going to do is you're going to say, okay, first, in my hand of 5 cards, do I have any orc cards? For every orc card, you reveal those. Mandatory, have to do this. And then you're going to draw a card for each from the orc deck. So here's what the orc deck might say. It might say, all right, put an orc in front of the fort and put one on the left side. Great, you do that. It might also have a orc advance symbol, which means all of the orcs will move towards the center. So if they're outside of a wall, they'll jump up on the wall. If they're on the wall, they'll jump down into the outer section of the fort. If they're in the outer section of the fort, then they're going to move into the center, and big problems. There also might be a siege tower card or a catapult card. So here's how you resolve that. So for either of those, you're going to take the siege tower or the catapult little standee for the person that drawed it. That goes in their play area. If play progresses all the way back to them, the siege tower and the catapult are going to resolve. Or if in the time it takes before it gets back to them, if another catapult card is revealed, it's going to immediately activate the catapult. Same with the siege tower. Now, why do you care about these things? Well, first off, with the catapult, this is what could potentially limit what you're working on in terms of these upgraded equipment cards. So you're going to flip a card from the catapult deck once it's activated, and it's going to cover up one of the equipment slots, potentially eliminating a card that you've already been working towards building. And I'm going to come back and explain that. You know what, Alex, this game seems very simple, but there's a lot of rules here.
Yes.
There's a lot of rules here. Wow, interesting. Okay. And that's the way you lose. If all of those slots are filled up, you lose. Now, the siege tower, if the siege tower is activated, it delivers a troll into the back of the keep. In that back section where you're trying to clear rubble, there are random troll tiles that will have different difficulty, different things you need to do to kill them. Now, I forgot to mention this too. If a troll is in the keep, in the back portion there, you cannot dig there. Similarly, if orcs are in a spot with resources, you cannot collect resources there. Okay, need to know that. So yeah, if you have to deal with a troll, they're usually pretty tough. They're slowing you down. It's a distraction. You don't want to do that. All right. So let's talk about combat. So you need to kill these orcs because, again, if you have too many orcs out, they're going to steal your gold, or they may just trigger the end game by you just have too many orcs out. So what you're going to do is, if you want to fight an orc in melee or a troll, you're gonna move into the same spot with them, and then you're going to spend enough melee cards from your hand to hopefully kill them. And so at the start of the game, your melee cards are melee 1, and you can combine them, right? So if I have 2 melee cards, great, that's 2 melee. As we get new stuff, we might be able to do, be more powerful in that regard. So for your total melee points, you are going to roll these attack dice. And the attack dice have some blank sides on them. They have some single hits, some double hits on them. And you're going to roll them. And if you can get 2 hits, then you've killed an orc. Terrific. You did it. Good job. If you don't get enough, then the orc's fine. There's no way to track damage. So if you only get 1 hit, that orc is untouched. You got to try again later. Someone else needs to do that. There's also shooting with your bows, your crossbows. These are the range attacks. Now, this needs to be done usually from the parapet.
Only.
Only from the parapet. Right. Only from the parapet. And certain parapets can't see other certain areas. You can never shoot into the keep itself. You can basically shoot. Oh, sorry. Yes. Go ahead.
This is a confusing rule, but you can't shoot into the workshops. You can target the walls, the areas outside of the walls. You can't shoot the workshops, but from one specific tower,
yes,
you can shoot into the area where the tunnel's being dug if you want to aim at trolls.
Yes. Yes.
Or goblins, I guess. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So yeah, that's how combat works. Now let's talk about the equipment, the different equipment cards you can upgrade. So they have some cost in terms of resources, the wood, wool, and ore to build. And it's basically a free action. Once you've gathered resources, you could just assign these resources to cards, and you can choose to either immediately finish them and build them for yourself or keep them for yourself, or you can leave them there for other players to get later. And it's cooperative, so you will want to do that. But what's important is that in order to get one of these newly built equipment cards, you have to have an unused card in your hand to be able to remove from the game to replace it with. And then you can use that equipment card immediately. And some of the easy ones, they might say, hey, you just need 2 wood to complete this. Great. These cards are generally better than some of the ones you have. The medium ones are a lot more to build. Harder ones, they're like, hey, you need 6 ore to build this, or you need 2 of each, or whatever. But they're really good. They're really strong. So we're talking about increased dig capacity, increased melee. Maybe you can gather a whole bunch of resources with 1 card. Lots of different stuff. That's pretty interesting there. So yeah, you just keep doing this. You go around, everyone takes a turn, you activate the orcs, you play cards, you gather resources, you hopefully dig rubble, and hopefully don't die in this horrible siege of Runedar. The siege itself, not necessarily the game. Or maybe necessarily the game. I don't know. I'm just saying war is hell. That's all. All right, that's Siege of Runedar, Alex. What were your expectations?
So, Ludonova, I couldn't name the specific games, but just from a mental image of the publisher in my mind, I like their stuff generally, I think. Again, it's sort of one of those where I couldn't offhand name like 5 games Ludonova has published, but I have a generally positive brand association, if that makes sense. Reiner Knizia, I enjoy some of the games, and I found this is a more thematic than I'm used to, less mathy than I'm used to, and different mechanics than I would expect from a Reiner Knizia game. Interesting. And then I saw a rules explanation from the gaming rules, basically Paul Grogan's channel, and watched him do a sort of tutorial playthrough. And, okay, this has some really interesting deck building elements. Oh, it looks thematic. Oh, this has some cool table presence. Interesting. And so I had pretty high expectations going into my plays of this, as to, this is potentially really cool. Really cool. Yeah, so those were my impressions going into this one. Sean, what about you?
Yeah, so before we picked this for a review game, I saw this out on the table at Empire several times. The staff were playing it, and it looked cool. It looked really cool. Like you said, great table presence. And man, they were having fun. They were yelling and screaming. They were having a blast. 2 separate occasions, I saw people really enjoying this. Rory had told me, "Oh, this game is great." Always take that with a grain of salt from Rory, but he seemed to enjoy it. And then I'm like, "Oh, Reiner Knizia." I'm not the biggest Reiner Knizia fan, but I was intrigued because this in no way looked like a Reiner Knizia game. So I like deck building. I like deck building where there's some sort of interaction with the board, like trains or clank. And so, yeah, I'm like, yeah, I've got some reasonably optimistic expectations for this game. So, yeah, those were my expectations for Siege of Runedar.
Sean, are you ready to slam? Here comes the jam.
All right, let's hear it. What do we do, Alex?
In our last episode, Atlantis Rising review, I gave you all sorts of grief for playing a cooperative game solo for your exclusive plays of that game, and talked about some of the differences.
Nice.
Sean, guess what I ended up having to do to get the requisite plays for this game? Exclusively played a cooperative game solo. So
wow.
I will throw that caveat on this review that this is the review of I played this solo and only solo. I don't generally enjoy very many solo games, at least in a board game form. I do think I got a reasonable experience of this, and kind of to sanity check, I watched the Game Boy Geek, Dan King, his review of this afterwards, and his thoughts were very similar to mine, and I'm curious where yours are. So my impressions, my experience, all of that came from a solo perspective. I think I can extrapolate a little bit. Sean, you might be able to fill in some of the gaps. But yes, I gave you all sorts of grief last episode, and yeah.
Oofa doofa. Oof.
How the turntables have turned. Anyway.
All right.
Rulebook. Sean, how'd you learn this one?
Eugene taught me. Huzzah.
Huzzah!
And I'll be honest, I did look at the rulebook a couple times. So I don't think I can really say a whole lot about the rulebook. That's unfortunate.
I can.
You know what's interesting? I usually, even if I am taught the game, I usually do spend some time in the rulebook in order to just get a feel for it, get some impressions of it so I can talk about it on the podcast. But I didn't care to.
Okay. Sean, I learned this thing primarily from the rulebook. So I had seen the gaming rules and had kind of a sense of what this might be. But to get to the specific details and set up and get through a play of this, I did use the rulebook and pretty extensively.
Okay.
I am not the biggest fan of how they organize the information in here. So it talks about a standard turn in this, and that's how they generally explain the game. So they talk about, hey, check if the catapult or siege tower in play, and if they are, do this. Hey, number 2, if you have any orc cards in hand, resolve those. And then step 3, do your turn. And then step 4, if you end your turn in the keep, do this. It conceptually didn't flow as well as I wanted it to. And I grokked it, and I got it from the rulebook, and I played with the correct rules. I've gone back and verified a couple of them where there was some uncertainty. But I don't think the information was particularly well organized, and I think there are a couple of unintuitive things that are done with this that hold it back. So, as an example, Sean, and normally we talk about this in art and components, but I think it belongs more here. When you flip over the orc cards, it will tell you need to put an orc on this side of the castle. And that's one thing they might show you is orcs go here. On this side, this wall, or this wall. And then there will be an arrow in the top corner that indicates, mostly on the orc, the cards that move the orcs, sometimes on siege tower and catapult cards, sometimes they'll have this arrow that says, hey, move everyone. It's in the top left corner of the card. The natural order of operations my brain would have for that is move all the orcs already in play, and then add new orcs in these locations.
Mm-hmm.
That is not how it works. Right. They give a specific example, and how it works is add the new orcs, then move them based on this. So an unintuitive flow of that. This is not a criticism of Dan King, because I understand where this understanding might have come from. So this game has mercenary cards where you can pay for special one-off abilities if you're really in desperate shape. I need to disable this catapult at one point. I pay 2 gold, basically 2 victory points. Gone. I can avoid this. Or there's 8 orcs in all the workshops. I need to just wipe them out. You can pay 2 gold. That'll get the job done. when the catapult fires and blocks one of your upgraded card slots, it has the same kind of lose a gold symbol to it.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're supposed to do is immediately lose a gold. What you cannot do is what you might imply, which is I can pay a gold if I want to remove this card from the slot.
Yeah.
Not a thing. So it's actually slightly harder, but it's a consistent icon that is used in different ways.
Yes. Yeah.
And so this theme, keep in mind this theme, like, of small stuff that kind of irked me with this one. And it came up in the rules. Again, I don't think the information was particularly well organized, especially when you have to differentiate between orcs, goblins, and trolls, which a lot of fantasy fans will have no problem differentiating between them. It takes me a little bit of mental effort to be like, oh, okay, that's an orc. Oh, that's a troll. Okay, that's okay. It's a little bit confusing to sort out.
That's it. That's interesting because okay. So then when we throw in things like kobolds, does that just throw you for a loop too?
That if kobolds were in this, that would be my last straw. I'd be like, that's too many fantasy critters to keep track of.
What about ogres on top of it?
Oh, ogres, that would have been even rougher. Yeah, giants, I could have parsed maybe, but
okay,
yeah.
Anyway, I don't know. Not to do anything with the game, I find that very interesting, and because of my deep immersion in Tolkien, deep immersion in Magic and Warhammer fantasy, like those are like I have very clearly distinct, like those are all very distinct in my mind, and it's interesting to hear that that's not the case for you.
Yeah, dead right. Sean, did you find, I guess on this topic, did you find the game easy to learn? You mentioned there are maybe more rules than you might expect in this game.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty easy to learn. I thought there was a lot of fairly intuitive things to this game. The only thing that that I wasn't intuitive, and I was just like, that's kind of weird, was just how limited the crossbows were. And I'm sure that makes sense from a game mechanics perspective, but thematically it didn't make sense. I mean, this whole time I'm kind of thinking of like Helm's Deep from Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, right? And there's going to be times you got to shoot into the keep. You just gotta, but you can't do that in the game. So, but no, overall, it was interesting, and I think it's a lot easier. And let me preface this: most games are easier to teach when you're looking at the whole setup in front of you, and obviously, but I do notice when I'm explaining rules to certain games, there are some games that seem much more complicated from a rules overview like this than they actually are once they're on the table. And I think especially if you're not really having to teach someone the concept of deck building, although this is not my preferred style of deck building, but we'll talk about that later. So,
okay. Art and components. And this is a game with as you mentioned, Sean, a high degree of a toy factor to it. How did you think this one was handled? I will say, Sean, this is the first time I've ever opened up a game and found a roll of double-sided tape inside.
I think the table presence on this game is incredible. I mean, truly incredible. Like I said in our expectation segment, I saw this on the table and was immediately drawn to it. I think that it knocks it out of the park component wise. It is, it's really solid. This is something where I will probably play this with Chewie at some point. I think she will enjoy this quite a bit. And I think she will enjoy moving her dwarf around the board. And I think she's going to like this a lot because of that. And in some regards, I think that she'll be able to play it as long as I'm doing all the upkeep stuff, right? The art is good, not great. So like the new equipment cards is okay. It's kind of bland. And I get why they do that. It's a very like bland background. I'm used to in like Magic cards when there's actual equipment cards, right? It's a sword. It's a particular sword or a particular shield, and that's the whole card. It's a sword or a shield. They're able to do the art for it, have it be the focus, not have it be caught up in the background or lost in the background, but there's still some sort of dynamic illustration that it's a part of, right? It's being held up over someone's head, but the focus is clearly on the sword, not on the person. Okay, it's a choice to just kind of do the sword or equipment floating on a plain background. Not particularly dynamic, right? Like, I really like deck building games or any games with cards where when it's not my turn, I can just be oohing and awing over the art in my hand. Wasn't doing that here. So,
I'll say but
proficient, passable.
Yeah. Well, and the layout of the cards are relatively intuitive. You can tell what the card does, how many actions it gives you. The flow of that all made sense. The icons were clear and crisp enough and distinct enough to understand this gets me this. Okay, this lets me collect 3 wood, whereas this one lets me collect 3 of any kind, whatever I want, assuming I'm in the right workshop, right?
Mm-hmm.
That stuff was easy to parse, and I liked that. Look, it looks really cool. The bottom of the box, it's a brilliantly efficient use of components, if that makes sense, where it's taking the insert and using the insert as the game board. Amazing conceptually. Really liked that a lot. Little things, another positive little thing, the standees are double-sided. So it's and what I mean by that is a typical standee might be double-sided in that it's the same on both sides. It's this character and then this character again mirrored. That's not the case here. It's the front of the character and then it's the back of the character. So it gives some depth on the standees themselves. I thought that was a pretty cool touch.
Yeah, and generally you're very big on dwarf booty. Like, you want to make sure you see some dwarf booty.
Gotta have that, Sean. Gotta have that dwarf booty.
Yeah.
So those are positives, and I'd say by and large successful from a component standpoint. Little tiny things. So, Sean, I don't know if you noticed this. The alignment on the upgrade board, not perfect.
Yes.
Not perfect. And it's not on just one side, it's on both sides. It doesn't quite line up. And so that I found that a little bit off. What else? Trying to think about things. This is the smallest of small things. Even smaller than that thing I just mentioned. It tells you to put the first block you remove towards the middle of the box. So sort of the 5 blocks, in theory, you could slide them, right? You could push and slide and kind of bump them off. And I guess you could still do that to kind of reveal as you go instead of lifting. But I think you're supposed to put the goblins that you have specifically for that pair because they increase in difficulty. You're supposed to put them on those spots. So if you slit it, you might bump those ones and it doesn't quite work. And so in theory, you just remove the one closest to as you dig out the tunnel. If they had flipped that, I would have liked it a little better. So you could kind of like slide the block out and then this pops out and then slide the next one and this pops out. You could basically, I followed the instructions as you built the board. You could do it the other way around. It wouldn't impact the game at all. Just a really tiny thing that was on my notes. So that's art and components. Gameplay. Sean, I only experienced this from a single player standpoint. But before we dive too into this, I think there are some elements of this design that are brilliant. Like actually brilliant. I think this 12-card deck building piece to things is brilliant. I like it a lot. I like this idea that you have these 12 cards. 2 of them are always bad. You upgrade your deck as you go. 2 of them, basically, the deck preparation is you will remove 2, put them under your thing, shuffle your deck, draw 5. Then your next turn, you'll draw another 5. And then the turn after that, you take the 2 from before, shuffle them in with the other 10, remove another 2 at random, and go from there. It's this really interesting, unpredictable deck building piece. I might get this super powerful card that I might not have access to for a while. Or on the flip side, I might have some easier turns because the orc cards are buried underneath. Add some unpredictability to it, add some flair to it. I could see how from a true deck builder standpoint this could be annoying, but I found that conceptually brilliant. I love the idea of gathering resources, putting them on cards, getting them ready, and I might not grab it when it's my turn. You might grab it on your turn and upgrade your deck. I might specialize in something, so I might wait for this one to get more digging actions or get more ranged attack actions or whatever else to come up. And I can kind of do it whenever I have enough resources and I have an extra card that I'm not using and want to swap that out for. I thought that was a really brilliant, truly brilliant mechanic in this game. Now the rest of it. So Sean, I only played this from a single player perspective. How were your plays of this? What were the player counts? How did they go?
I played this at 4 players. And I only played it one time, Alex. I did not like this game. Now, and I talked about playing this with Chewy. I'm going to play this with Chewy. Because I think she'll like it. We're going to go to Empire. We're going to play it. I think she'll like it. That's me taking one for the team, which I normally want other people to do. But I found this game tedious. I found it tedious. I agree with you. You're nodding your head quite
on
vigorously.
The tedious piece. Oh yes,
on the tedious piece. I agree with you. There is a good game here, but I think the problem for me is in a deck building game. Let's look at Dominion, right? And Dominion in theory is you just kind of doing the same thing every turn. Eventually your turns get more explosive as you're crafting your deck, and you're chaining things together. And except in rare occasions, they're pretty fast, right? Especially once everyone knows what they're doing. I mean, you play Dominion with a new player, and it's going to take them a while to kind of figure it out. You play it with a bunch of people that have played it like 50 times each, and you're just all boom, 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 boom. That's great. Now, take another deck builder that interacts with the board, like, say, Clank. Again, once someone understands what's going on, it's still pretty quick, even though there's this board interaction, right? Because everything is there on the cards, the number of movement points you have, the number of points you need to deal with the goblin or whatever it is in that particular space, the buys, etc. But here, it's really not a deck builder with a board element. It's a board game with deck building elements, kind of like we talk about baseball highlights a little bit. A tactical card game with deck building elements, right? Because really, it's about moving your piece on a board, picking up actual resources, like a resource management game, assigning them to the various equipment cards, moving into spaces with orcs, or moving onto the parapet, and then either shooting them or fighting them. And then you've got to roll dice, and you've got to resolve that. And you have to make decisions about, which card am I keeping in my hand so I can discard it from game in order to upgrade a card. And so I think what happens is there's a lot of time processing what you're doing that just slows it down quite a bit. And especially in a 4-player game. And this, I think I would enjoy this more at 3, but I don't think I would enjoy it so much more to really change my mind. It's just the turns are just tedious. And when you're doing the same thing round after round, it needs to be quick. I'm okay with it if it's quick. You look at Pandemic, except for the occasional turn where someone's like trying to figure out what you're going to do when things are really desperate. Moscow is exploded with all of these black cubes, and it's gonna cause all of these outbreaks in nearby cities. If you don't do something, how do we do this? But for the most part, turns can be pretty quick in a cooperative game like that. Here, I just felt like there was just so many things you had to do, and then to make matters worse, even this deck building, which again I do like, Alex. I do like that you may bury your orc cards. You may consistently bury the awesome equipment that you just worked so hard to get. I kind of like that, but it's also just an extra step in a game of a bunch of extra steps, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and so Sean, some of that stuff can kind of be done off turn. If you're playing this solo, it's do a turn, reshuffle, add 2, do a turn, add stuff, reshuffle, do a turn, like you're cranking the thing over and over and over, and a lot of times it feels like you're not making progress because you're too busy, fending off orcs, or hey, the catapult emerged again, and you're about to lose one of your card slots for the rest of the game. Or, hey, the siege tower emerged, and now your progress is about to get even slower unless you stop everything you're doing, run up to the tower, and hope, with no chance to mitigate, hope that you get lucky enough to get a hit on something.
Right.
And that's the thing. There is luck in this game, and I oftentimes enjoy a little dash of luck in a game. I can relish it when it's done in the right way. This is one where it is much, much, much harder to mitigate that luck. It doesn't provide a good system for that. There are some items that if you added them to your deck and happen to have them, could guarantee, say, 2 hits, right? Could guarantee something as part of an action, but few and far between, and you are sort of at the mercy of the dice in a lot of cases to pretty devastating effects.
Right. And I think the other big thing too is that I didn't feel like there was a lot of emergent gameplay as the game progressed, right? Again, because it's one card in, one card out. You always have 12 cards and you're seeing 10 in a cycle. And while, I replaced this 1 melee combat with a 3 melee combat, so I'm better at that particular action. Nothing was particularly interesting. I didn't feel like there was like a strong combo element to this game or opportunities to feel clever. And for longtime listeners, if a game can't give me opportunities to feel clever, that's a problem. That's a big problem for me.
Sean, did you win?
No, we did terrible. And part of it, I think, part of it was we were all trying to be jacks of all trades. And I think in a multiplayer game, there needs to be some specialization. We have talked about this quite a bit. And there, as much as I don't enjoy this game, I still want to play it. So Rory and I had talked about it. We're like, let's get one more play of this in. We were hoping to get in before tonight, but then Rory had some things blow up on Wednesday. Chewy's birthday on Thursday, her actual birthday, and then Friday night was birthday dinner with Genki. But we're gonna play it again, and it's weird to me. It's weird to me how much I did not enjoy this play. And Eugene has played this 3 times now, and he was miserable. He's like, I don't want to play this. He wants to play it again because he's frustrated that he isn't won. And we like, I've been thinking about this game. I've been thinking about this game way more than I would expect for a game I disliked as much as I did. And again, I'm willing to play it with Chewy. So like, I feel weird. Like there's a weird thing about this game. And I think because there is something really good at its core, and there's just sort of an implementation that kind of falls apart, if that makes sense.
You mentioned it's tedious, and for instance, the difficulty lever that they can pull in this game is how many blocks of rubble do you need to dig up every time you dig up a block. And right. This is an idea I'm taking straight from Dan King's review, but he's dead right. That's the only difficulty lever they have, and there isn't really a variability lever. The variability sort of comes from the order cards come out of the deck, but the cards don't have particularly interesting abilities. As you mentioned, it's this thing, but a little better, or this thing, but a lot better. But there's not a special, the most interesting special ability is the warp ability on some of the weapons, where you can warp from one part of the castle to the other, right? Okay, that's interesting. But there can be some empty turns in this where, well, there aren't any orcs on the board. I just need to dig stuff, but I don't have any digging cards in hand. And, oh, shoot. And that might be your fault. It might not be your fault because they might be buried under the discard token. And there's little you can do. And the moment you get too heavy into the dig side, well, all of a sudden you needed range attacks, or else, you're going to have a bunch of trolls finding their way into the castle, or you're going to lose card slots and lose the game that way. So the game is encouraging you to do a lot of different things at once, and it is quite difficult. I played this at solo on normal difficulty. I was not close to winning. I think I lost simultaneously in multiple different ways, basically. Like the orc deck ran out and also ran out of gold, and also the catapult was about to fire and take out my last card slot. Like 3 different ways I lost this game simultaneously. And I knew probably about 30-40% of the way into the game that I was not going to win. It wasn't going to happen. I played through anyway, and it was not a merciful end. And a lot of these, one of the things Pandemic does great is if you let a problem get out of control, it can get really out of control in a way that ends the game like that really quickly. This game can inflict a lot of pain on you, but not in such an explosive way that it will mercifully end your play early. I think that's a problem.
Yes.
Right? Like
yes,
you
100%.
probably knew. Yeah, you're not going to win,
Yes.
but you haven't officially lost yet either.
Yes.
Yeah. So it is frustrating because, as mentioned, there are some really brilliant things that this game has done. And I don't think they tested the difficulty on this enough. I don't think there was enough, say, love put into the deck building side, the options on the cards. But for what it's trying to do, you're not wrong, Sean. Like, this is one where if you were introducing it to new gamers, I think they'd probably have a lot of fun with it. Even though it's not the lightest on rules. It's intuitive enough on rules that you could get it, you could explain it. Folks would find it immersive, especially if you like fantasy, if you like tower defense. But it's frustrating. It's frustrating. It's tedious and not variable enough, and probably not well tuned enough on the difficulty perspective. And it was just tedious and frustrating at the end of it, Sean. So, but I will say this to its benefit. Memorable.
Yes. So this is kind of my last thoughts on gameplay, and it's going to kind of overlap with theme. So I think that's fine. It's fitting here. This felt for me like it lacked big narrative or cinematic moments that I think it would have otherwise been so easy to have present here. And again, I referenced before the Siege of Helm's Deep in Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers. Alex, have you seen Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers?
Yes.
Okay. I was getting really nervous there for a second. So number one, like the whole time I'm like, wow, this, like, what if this were a Lord of the Rings game and this was the Battle of Helm's Deep? Okay, cool. So now it's not dwarves. You've got a dwarf, you've got an elf, you've got a human and a couple other humans, right? And they have asymmetric powers, right? They have some sort of special ability. Like that's an easy add-on that takes you from being just a nameless dwarf to somebody that might specialize in something or have some sort of cool ability. Like, oh, this is the Aragorn character. This is the Legolas character who's like really good, really good with a crossbow. He can re-roll misses or something. I mean, something like that, right? And so then it kind of also pushes you in a direction. But that's not really Reiner Knizia, I don't think, right? I almost wonder, like, that's not somewhere where his design brain would necessarily go. I may be wrong. I don't know. But then I'm thinking of then moments from the Battle of Helm's Deep. I'm thinking of Legolas sliding down the staircase on a shield and just popping off arrow after arrow. Or I'm about to lose my voice. Aragorn and Gimli going outside onto the little rampway, and then Gimli getting tossed into a column of Uruk-hai as they come up. And there's no, like, you talked about the movement cards that let you go from one spot to another. Like, you could almost feel like that's someone making a mad dash and hopping over orcs' heads. But I never did that. And if this were something where you could, I don't know, it just really felt lacking. And there seemed to be a big disconnect between the cards I'm playing and the actions my dwarf is taking and feeling cool doing it. And I never experienced that.
So I think we're officially on theme here anyway. But
yeah.
If instead of orcs, they were gold-stealing robots, and their prime directive and only mission in life was gold, that would make more sense than how the orcs act here. Because the orcs basically climb the walls. You might be in the same space as them, and they'd be like, okay, cool, whatever, man. Like, hit me if you want, but I'm going for the gold, and you might stop me, you might not. But they can't damage you, right? The damage that you take is collectively to your upgrade spot. That's the only damage that can be inflicted. And otherwise, it's just stuff that gets in your way. It's stuff that keeps you from gathering resources, stuff that keeps you from advancing the game or making progress. It's just stuff that blocks. It's not stuff that attacks. You can't have an injured dwarf. You don't have any penalties for that. And to be clear, I would not advocate to make this game harder, but you're correct. It loses some of those thematic elements, and it's that grind. And maybe it's perfectly thematic in that a siege is supposed to kind of grind you down and wear you out and whatever else. But that doesn't make the game fun.
Yeah. No, I agree. We're of a single mind here, it sounds like, Alex.
And what's interesting is you played this at 4, and I played this at 1, but I have a feeling I'd feel somewhat similar at higher player counts. I would probably advise people early on, hey, the game doesn't give you any specialization off the bat. We need to make specialization. But that might be ill-advised in some cases because it, Well, and Sean, to talk about brutal difficulty again with this, in the solo play, so the way the catapults work and the siege towers work is when they flip out of the deck, they go into a specific player's play area. And so the next time that player's turn comes around, you have to have taken care of it, or so either another card flips over with the same siege tower, then it just immediately activates, bummer, or it comes back around to you, and on your turn, it's the first thing it does. It does its thing and then goes away. In a solo game, it just does it basically immediately. Like, it appears, you have your turn. Yeah. There's no adjustments for it. You have your turn to handle that siege tower or catapult, and if you don't, oops, sorry, that nasty thing hits you.
Ooh, I don't care for that at all.
I didn't care for it either, Sean. And to be clear, if I miss that as a rule where there's a modification for solo play, apologies, I didn't see it. So, yeah.
Let me say this also thematically. In all of the fantasy that I've experienced, I think you would have a heck of a time loading up a troll in a siege tower. They would refuse to go in a siege tower, right? In all of my fantasy experience, you would load up a siege tower with a ton of orcs. The siege tower is, it's this big tower that's on wheels, that's getting moved forward, usually being pushed by trolls or ogres in the back, right? And then the bunch of orcs come out on top, right? I could see it like saying, hey, we're gonna dump 3 orcs on the wall. Okay. But you can't load a troll in a siege tower. They're just gonna refuse to go. They're just not gonna do it. Right? And instead, I don't know where I'm going here.
They come popping out of a tunnel. They come popping out of the
back, right? They come in the back of the keep instead of showing up on the wall. I'm like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. I don't understand that at all. Also, I'm not crazy about this idea of you are running around your keep looking for scraps of wood, ore, and wool to build weapons on the fly. I don't know. It's almost like I'd rather you be finding them in some way and not building them, not collecting resources to build them, but some similar mechanic where you're still, I don't know. It just seemed weird to be like, hey, this is it. In every movie of a siege of there's all the preparation, and it's like, okay, well, now they're outside our walls. We're done preparing. We're done sharpening the swords. We're done equipping everyone. Now it's fight time. You don't have time to be on the blacksmith table cart thing building stuff. It was kind of weird. I don't know.
And it succeeds on toy factor.
Yes.
For having that feel thematic, like a castle you can run around, and rules often fit into the theme. Not always, but often. So, I think we've talked enough about this game, Sean. This is interesting because your thoughts on the scale would be different than what the realistic piece of the scale is, because you plan on playing this again. Anyway, well, I mean, you'll dive into this. We rate everything here at the Dukes of Dice on a 6-point scale, 1 being bad, bad, very bad, 6 being good, good, very good. And Sean, I'm sure you're going to break down some of the nuances of the scale as you talk about this.
That's what I am, Alex. I'm a modern, nuanced man. So, did you shake your head at me being I have nuance. I live in nuance as an attorney. Okay. All right. I'm going to cut to the chase. I'm giving this a 3. So 3 as a game is okay. Not exciting. Will play in the right situation. It's certainly not any higher than a 3 for me in no way, shape, or form. And I think a lot of what I've been saying, Alex, would lead you to think that this would possibly get a 2 for me. 2 is game has some merit, but has significant issues. That sounds a lot like what I said. And there's also sort of the phantom description of a 2 is I don't want to play this game again. And it is very possible that after another play with, say, Rory and Eugene, and then one play with Chewy, that I will never want to play this game again. And it would probably be a 2. But there's something weird. Like we said, there is the core of what could be a really good game here. There's just some that almost sounds like, this game has some merit. It has significant issues. I wouldn't be surprised if this falls to a 2 in the double take. I mean, if I play this 2 more times, which is bonkers for a post-review play of a game you don't really care for that much, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm completely done. I'm happy if I never play this game again. Then I think it needs to be a 2, but there's just something lingering here. Also, I think maybe that says something about, hey, maybe I need to play games more before I actually review them. Weird.
What a concept.
Self-criticism. Our Dukes nights have been weird. I'm gonna leave it at that. And having them every other week's hard. Not doing games here at the Duchy itself was hard. I don't know. But I will say it is hard after a first play, where you're just like, I did not enjoy myself.
Sean?
Yeah.
I think this game has some merit, and I would emphasize in the merit piece of this, out-and-out brilliance. I find some of the deck-building pieces of this really cool and interesting. Using the box as a castle, really cool and interesting. Conceptually, had a lot of promise to it, but significant issues. And not inclined to play it again. It may hang around the collection, and I think I'm likely to remember this one far more than I've remembered other games in the double take. So I think memorability, helpful. But it's a 2. It's repetitive. And Sean, I'll give an alternative on this one. When I first read the rules and thought about this one as part of maybe getting Abby to play this with me, she's been under the weather. We've both been hit by whatever Ruby had. She's gotten hit worse by that. But she might have possibly been able to play if that weren't the case. And I said, this seems very similar in a lot of ways to Zombie Teens, right? It's sort of tower defense-y. It's kind of divided up in that grid. Relatively straightforward objective. Zombie Teens, while it in some ways can be sort of repetitive and certainly has elements of luck and other things, is delightfully quick, has variability. The game changes and evolves as you play. This just feels tedious and looks pretty and has a lot of promise and does not live up to it. I'm very comfortable giving this one a 2. Game has some merit but significant issues. I think I'm very unlikely to play it again, but very likely to remember it. So, there you go.
All right.
That's the Duke's review of the Siege of Runedar. Sean with a low end of a 3, probably. 3 likely to become a 2. And I'm already there. It's a 2 from me.
You are listening to the Dukes of Dice, proud members of the Dice Tower Network. For other great shows in the network, check out dicetowernetwork.com. Back to Alex and Sean for this week's Dukes Double Take.
All right, next up, our Dukes Double Take, episode 249, Rank and Tile. And Sean, this actually should have been a quadruple take. The Dukes of Dice website doesn't have it listed, but we did record, and it is released, episode 248, where we reviewed Gengopolis. but it didn't exist in the archives, at least in the typical order.
Oh.
But I do things in a weird way. I do like dukesofdice.com/page/7 to try and find the most recent Double Take, or page/9 or whatever else. And it just skipped from 247 to 249. And I got worried for a moment that our numbering system was off. It's always a constant fear that that we've misnumbered somewhere along the way. But no, I have confirmed episode 248 does exist. It was Ginkopolis. We'll do a double take on that one next time around.
Okay.
This one, we're just looking back at episode 249, Rank and Tile, where we reviewed Red Rising from Stonemaier Games.
Let me interrupt.
Yeah.
Here's what I want the guild to do. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to post a multiverse Dukes on Deck for the correct this episode with the correct Ginkopolis, so that there is now people will name, because I'm curious. See what I'm saying? You've
I'm
messed
just
with...
gonna move this. I know I've affected the naming timeline. Gold probably wouldn't be the name of this episode. So many different things have shifted. A butterfly flaps its wings and there's a tornado in Kansas. I understand. I'm not doing that. We're just going to talk about Ginkopolis next episode. We all have to live with our choices.
Okay, I'm going to do it then. I'll do it, Alex.
Oh, my goodness. All right. Episode 249, Rank and Tile, Red Rising was the review. Sean, I was surprised. I thought this was one where I had sat it out because I have
thought
kind of
so
taken,
too. Yeah.
I had taken up a policy of sitting out Stonemaier review games. I absolutely did not. I gave a very lengthy disclaimer at the beginning, but I think it was based on a tight timeline and wanting to kind of strike while the iron is hot. You couldn't find anyone else to do the podcast with, to do the review section. That wouldn't throw you off now. You've done 40-minute solo reviews of stuff since. But at the time, I think you wanted a buddy, and I felt comfortable enough talking about it with a lengthy disclaimer that, hey, I'm friends with the designer, I'm friends with the publisher, I'm friends with everyone involved here. I genuinely like the game. I have some criticisms. Here are those criticisms. Do with it what you will. So I did review it, but I was surprised. I literally had written the intro to the show differently because I had thought you had just reviewed it. Nope, we both reviewed it. Sean, at the time, you gave this one a 4. You said a pretty high 4. And you said if this was a book series you loved, enjoyed, and there was that thematic tie-in connection to it, it was probably good enough of a game that with the right theme, or a theme that resonated more with you, it would have been a 5. Mm-hmm. So that's where you ended up on Red Rising. I gave this one a 5. I said, look, it's my style of game. It doesn't reach the same heights of Scythe and Viticulture, but I liked it a lot. It's versatile. I can imagine playing this with newer gamers and also with more experienced gamers and having a good time, and thought it played cleanly and looked good on the table. So those were my thoughts. I gave it a 5. You gave it a 4. Sean, have you played this one since?
I played it twice, fairly close to with the review, after the review of it. Not recently. And I'm going to keep it at a 4. Good game, worth playing just all the time, belongs to the Duchy. I do think that as I played it more, the disconnect from the theme, like whenever there's a very strong tie-in with a book or a movie series, it feels like you're missing out on something by not knowing that, right? Like I almost feel like if I knew nothing about Dune, playing Dune Imperium, I'd feel like I was just missing something. I feel like I'd be missing like, oh, there's this clever reference on this thing that I just don't know anything about, and I just have to kind of shrug my shoulders. It just feels like I'm missing out on something, and it's almost a feel bad. And this is in no way a problem for Stonemaier or anything like that. I don't have enough time to read every book series or watch every movie. That makes me feel bad. That makes me a little sad, you know?
Okay. Fair enough.
That's all.
Sean, I have played this multiple times since, and not just after the review. This has been one that often gets suggested or will hit the table. And I've still enjoyed the plays of this. I obviously had read the book series, so I had some ties to it there. There's some absolute too similar of color kinds of issues and some stuff to parse that are still annoying every time I get this to the table. But I also enjoy this one every time I get it to the table. So I don't see any reason to bump it down. Again, take all this with a grain of salt, relationships and all that fun stuff. But yeah, 5 for me still. And I'd say the guild is closer to high on this. I know there were some initial kind of, disappointed or whatever else reviews from folks who were expecting the next Scythe. take whatever else. But let's start with Sarah Reiber, who says, I agree that Red Rising works well at lower player counts. I've been playing it 2-player a lot, and once you get to know the cards, you have a great push and pull between the players. If you're used to lower player counts, it can feel frustratingly messy at higher counts with no room for strategy. My daughter absolutely loves it, one of her top 10 games of all time. Sean, had you mostly played this at lower player counts, higher player counts?
I played it at 2, 3, and I think just 2 and 3. I think just 2 and 3. Yeah, 2 and 3.
I think this succeeds as a 2-player game. I think my favorite player count's probably 3, just because there's more competition on some of the tracks, and that becomes more of an interesting factor to the game. But I think it can play well at higher counts. I do think 3 is my favorite count for this game. So yeah, thanks, Sarah.
All right, and then Mr. from Board Game Gumbo says, our plays, it's called a callback, Alex. Our plays have slowed down, but I still like this better than Fantasy Realms. I love the push and pull on the board, the huge deck, the swinginess, and the lucky pulls. I love the thematic nature of the cards. It's a solid 4 for me.
And then Adam Dalton says, Red Rising is one I still enjoy quite a bit. I continue to want to play it, but only at the 2 or 3 player count. The theme does go a long way for me, though, and I realize this isn't true for a lot of my group. The disappointment is still there with the deluxe version that you can't tell the colors apart on. Most folks compare this to Fantasy Realms, which I played a few times this year as well, and think I'd still prefer Red Rising if playing with 3 players. Seems like I'm the only one in my group that would choose it, though. I give it a 4 on the Ducal scale. So yeah, there you go. Red Rising, kind of in that 4-5 range for a lot of the guild and for us as well. So no movement on this one, Sean. Stays at a 4 for you, stays at a 5 for me. Before we wrap things up, the best of the rest. Honorable mentions. Names we didn't pick but could have. First up, Kyle Kelly with Go for Gold, referencing kind of the combination of the orcs and the dwarves kind of battling over gold in Siege of Runedar, and the gold as sort of the ruling class or upper of the upper classes in Red Rising.
And then Siba Rourke, the name father, he suggested Mine, All Mine. And we've got Siege of Runedar. The dwarves are, I guess, mining for gold, and they're mining to get out of the fort. And then I believe there's some connection with Red Rising in terms of like the oligarchy of the caste system.
Without spoiling anything, the book starts in a mine.
Oh, okay, that too. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, it very much fits. It's a good one. Jeremiah Brammer with Nothing New Here. Nothing New Here, the title suggestion. Mentioning that Red Rising, pretty similar to Fantasy Realms, and the Siege of Runedar, a new deck builder from Reiner Knizia, who supposedly invented deck building with The Quest for El Dorado. So 2 games that kind of iterate on familiar themes. That's Nothing New Here.
And that's, so he's saying, he's like, wait, that's not really a thing. Did Reiner Knizia say that tongue in cheek, or
I don't know. I don't know the Quest for El Dorado.
Or was that a publisher? I wonder if that was a publisher that was like, oh, look at this new concept that Reiner Knizia has invented.
Yeah, I don't know. Certainly there were deck builders before. Anyway.
And then Baker Mitchell with a Ben Folds reference here, which, hey, by all means, 1 Angry Dwarf and 112 unique card faces. We've got the dwarf from Runedar, and then I guess there are 112 unique cards in Red Rising. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, and referencing what song, Sean?
1 Angry Dwarf and 100. Wait, 1 Angry Dwarf and 100.
He has 200 solemn faces.
200 solemn faces. Yes, from the Whatever and Ever Amen album.
Yeah.
I believe it's track 1.
Is it?
Yeah,
track
I think it's
1?
track 1. Yeah.
Okay. And then finally, Blaine Miley with Under Siege, obviously referencing Siege of Runedar. Under could reference sort of the mining in Red Rising. It could represent underclasses. It could represent a few things. But there you go, Blaine Miley with Under Siege.
Plush, like a plush doll.
Plush?
Plus, whenever you can get a Steven Seagal reference, that'll always be a favorite of mine. Not really. Not at all, in fact.
No. Well, all right. Sean, I'm going to go play with my no longer sick baby girl and then do some hockey this weekend. Are you doing anything cool the rest of this weekend?
I'm going to switch over our swamp cooler because it's getting hot in here. And then I'm going to record I'm going to edit the podcast, Alex. That's
You're
my
going to
weekend.
record a secret separate podcast?
Possibly. My Rizzoli and Isles second podcast is still going really well. So.
Oh, okay. Well, it is getting hot in here, so let's take off, but not our clothes.
All right. Well, that will do it then for episode 273. Thanks again to BJ for the title Gold. Until next time, this is Sean.
And Alex.
And Duculator, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening to the Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy on April 23rd, 2022. Our theme music provided by Carbohydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other board gaming podcasts, check out DicetowerNetwork.com. And for all the latest in the Duchy, go to DukesOfDice.com. Find us on Twitter at Dukes of Dice. Join in conversations on our Board Game Geek Guild. Find us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to our sponsor, Game Toppers LLC. Remember, if it's not a showstopper, it's not a game topper. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Until then, game on.